Halloween week special. Evidence Box 23. A cold case archivist finds an unlabeled evidence box with a sealed camcorder. The video shows detectives examining a crime scene, her own office, dated 2 days in the future. The more she watches, the more the objects in her real office rearrange to match the footage. Meta-Investigative horror, self-fulfilling investigation. They called it the Stacks, a windowless annex behind records where old cases went to fade. Fluorescent lights hummed like tired bees. Filing cabinets exhaled paper dust, and the concrete floor kept secrets colder than the air. She liked it that way. The archivist, Mara, cataloged what everyone else forgot, a quiet custodian of other people's worst days. Most jobs reward what you can show. Hers rewarded what you could keep from vanishing. On Tuesday, the delivery cage rolled in with the usual buckled banker's boxes and mismatched evidence bags, black marker bleeding through old masking tape. She checked chain of custody seals, logged case numbers, measured the slow drift of time by labels that read things like 2003, January, storm. Then she found the box with no label, no case number, no initials, no barcode, just a gray cardboard face that gave nothing back when she stared into it. People assume the scary part in an archive is what you might find. Mara knew better. The scary part is what refuses to be found by anyone except you. She tilted the box, listening for the whisper of contents. A small, dense weight thudding softly against one corner. Seals looked official but wrong. Fresh plastic with heat blisters, as if someone had done a careful job in a careless hurry. She should have sent it upstairs, told evidence control that an unlabeled item had wandered into her stacks like a stray dog. But her job was to rescue orphans, and this one was sitting on her cart like a question with eyes. She signed it into her temporary log as unknown, box 23, then paused. Why 23? It wasn't the 23rd box of the day. It wasn't pressed with a number. The choice slid out of her like a reflex, and for a second she felt foolish, as if she had just named a storm by instinct. Inside, there was the camcorder, not the sleek kind you could palm like a phone, but a compact black body with a flip screen and a scratched lens hood. The sort investigators used before everything went digital. No tape case, no DVD, nothing obvious. Just a sealed door with a tamper strip across it, the red letters shouting, "Do not open without explaining why." On the side, a silver sticker, faded but legible. Property of City of Harrow, PD, Forensic Media Unit. Mara had a habit she'd never told anyone about. When she touched evidence, she imagined the rooms it had lived in. A camcorder like this had seen cramped hallways, motel carpets, living rooms with knotted curtains, the flutter of crime scene tape that never quite settled. She rested her fingers on the battery plate and felt the faintest stickiness, a residue like dried gloves powder or old adhesive. Whatever this camera had recorded, it had been handled recently. And yet, the dust on the box said it had slept a while. She set the camcorder on her desk, the one against the cinder block wall, with the squeaky chair and the ceramic mug shaped like a file folder. The stacks were quiet enough to hear your own pulse, and right then, hers was annoyingly loud. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like recognition, the feeling you get when you walk into a room and realize the furniture has been moved 2 inches. Nothing dramatic, just enough to trip your balance. The inventory sheet should have been the next step. Instead, she opened her desk drawer, reached past the rubber bands and binder clips, and took out her utility knife. The red tamper strip had a clean seam along the hinge. She pressed the blade, breathed out, sliced slow. The plastic lifted with a sticky surrender. A little white shock of guilt ran through her, then faded. If something needed to be known, it had found the one person who would not look away. The battery blinked a single bar when she pressed power. The screen woke up, first in gray, then in blue, then in the practical ugliness of a device made to work, not to charm. No password, no lockout. The playback menu showed one video file, not a series, not a folder, just a single line of text on a blacklist. Exhibit 23. MP4, date stamp below it. She read the numbers twice before her brain accepted them. Recorded Thursday, October 30th, for ein toy. Today was Tuesday, October 28th. She didn't smile. She didn't gasp. She felt something simpler, a quiet click in the mind, like a key turning on its own. People who live with old cases understand time as layers, not lines. Sometimes layers slide. She tapped play with a knuckle because her fingertips had gone strangely cold. The screen fuzzed, then cleared, and the first frame appeared, a familiar room, the kind she saw every day, the kind she was sitting in now, except it wore the bright blue gloves of police attention. Detectives moved through frame, those careful figures who learned to step around spilled lives. Blue tape crossed a doorway. Evidence tents dotted the floor like little yellow teeth. On the wall, the same corkboard she owned, the same thumbtack constellation, except her articles were missing, replaced with photographs she did not recognize. The camera panned to a desk, then paused on a chipped ceramic mug shaped like a file folder. Her mug. A hairline crack ran along the handle. The same hairline crack she hid with her thumb when she lifted it. She leaned back without meaning to, as if a wave had nudged her. The stack stayed still, but the frame on the screen insisted. Time, 2 days ahead, was walking through her office like a polite intruder, and the box with no label, the one she had named by instinct, was standing in the video's corner, open, empty, a small gray mouth that had already said something she had not yet heard. She could have stopped the footage right there. She could have reported it, sealed it, passed it to someone who would turn it into a memo. But the video kept playing, and one of the detectives crouched by her chair, pointing to something on the floor that the camera did not yet show. The archivist in her leaned forward, the way a diver leans toward a dark, glassy surface. Whatever waited under that pointing finger had already happened, 2 days from now, exactly where she sat. And something in the present, very gently, began to shift to meet it. Mara told herself it was just the power of suggestion, like when someone mentions ants and suddenly your skin itches. She paused the footage, stared at the frozen frame, then looked at her own room. Same cinder block walls, same file carts, same mug with the hairline crack, a twin in a mirror with the wrong reflection. People underestimate how suggestible an ordered mind can be. When you're trained to memorize where every box lives, a single object out of place feels like a splinter. And there it was, a splinter. Her desk chair turned 3 inches to the left, a subtle skew that hadn't been there a minute ago. She checked the floor for fresh scuffs. The concrete held marks like a chalkboard that never gets erased. And now, a faint crescent arc glowed where the chair had traveled. Thin and new, chalk gray against darker dust. She tried to reconstruct her last movement, made a lawyer's argument with herself about how she might have bumped it. That was the first lie every investigator tells, the gentle lie that the world prefers inertia. But she could smell nitrile, a clean, powdery sweet that belonged to latex gloves, not her bare hands. On the camcorder, a detective's voice drifted in, low and procedural, the tone of people who use calm like a tool. He said a time. He said her room number. He said the word disturbance without decoration. The camera tilted toward her corkboard, and the sight of it, on screen, rearranged, brought a quick pressure behind her eyes. In her real room, the board still showed clipped articles about budget cuts in records and a handwritten note reminding her to return a stapler. On the screen, those scraps were gone, replaced by printed photographs, overlapping edges like scales, faces, hallways, close-ups of dusted surfaces. The top left pin held a Polaroid of the very chair she now refused to touch again. She played the footage 10 seconds more. The detective, with the soft voice, lifted a small evidence tent and placed it by the chair leg. Numbered 7. Yellow, triangular, banal. He stepped away, and the camera caught, just for a second, a sliver of something under the desk. Not blood, not anything dramatic. A strip of gray tape with handwriting in black marker stuck to the underside of the desktop edge like a label someone had hidden. The words were upside down, but her brain read them anyway. Box 23. She paused and let silence do what it does best, which is force truth to the surface. Archivists develop a superstition of cause and effect, the way fishermen read water. She had named the box 23 before she saw that tape in the future. She had chosen the number, then found it assigned backward to her. That wasn't magic. That was the kind of feedback loop people stumble into when they stare at themselves too long. If you tell a story about a room, the room starts telling one back. She stood, careful, and checked the underside of her real desk. Cold concrete, humming lights, her breath louder than she liked. No tape, no handwriting, just a faint rectangle of cleaner wood, the ghost of some old label she'd scraped off months ago without thinking. When she straightened, a paper slid off the corkboard by itself and kissed the floor. A single staple flashed in the light as it fell. She didn't lift it. She couldn't make herself change the picture the room was painting. There are moments when a person's life divides. Not with thunder, just a quiet click, like a drawer closing. Mara watched herself make a decision she would later pretend had come from policy. She opened a fresh chain of custody form, wrote Exhibit 23 in small, steady letters, then stopped halfway through the E because, on the video, the soft-voiced detective said a name she knew from the building directory. Someone who had never once set foot in the stacks. And in her real room, the phone on the wall blinked with a new voicemail light. she swore hadn't been there a heartbeat ago. The red voicemail light pulsed in the half-dark like a heartbeat, steady, patient, and deeply out of place. Nobody called the Stacks. Nobody even remembered the number, except for IT and the janitor who fixed the flickering light last winter. Mara just stood there, one hand hovering over the receiver, her mind splitting between what she should do and what she already knew she would do. Curiosity was her disease, the chronic kind that eats reason in small, invisible bites. She pressed play. Static, a soft hiss, like air escaping a slow leak. Then a click, a pause, and a woman's voice. Her voice. "Mara," it said, low and hoarse, as if she'd been running. "If you're hearing this, don't touch the camera again. It's not recording. It's watching." Then silence. No timestamp, no number, nothing else. The call had come from an internal extension, her own. The system log showed it was placed at 9:14 p.m., October 30th. Same as the video file, same as the date 2 days from now. Her fingers trembled on the receiver, leaving faint sweat marks that cooled fast in the air. She placed it down carefully, almost tenderly, as if afraid the plastic would scream. The office around her seemed to inhale. The hum of the fluorescent lights deepened. The old air vents wheezed awake, stirring papers on her desk. She could feel the pressure change, the faint tug of suction from somewhere behind her, like the building itself was exhaling through the cracks in its ribs. She turned, slow. Something was different. The far end of the room, where the shelves met the concrete wall, was darker now, even though the lights hadn't changed. The shadows seemed thicker, less obedient. A shape interrupted the even lines of boxes, a small outline she didn't remember. One of the archive carts had rolled 1/2 meter out from the wall, its wheel resting on a fresh scuff mark. She would have sworn she'd locked its brake. She approached, heart sinking with the buzz of the lights. As she reached the cart, her boot brushed against something on the floor, a strip of evidence tape, curled and yellowed, the kind used to seal boxes, printed across it, in a faded red font. Box 23, hold for review. The edges were torn, like someone had ripped it off in a hurry. She lifted it carefully. The back was sticky, still tacky, like it had been peeled seconds ago, not years. She looked down at the cart. The gray box sat there again, the same one, unsealed, waiting. But she'd moved it. She knew she had. She had placed it on her desk 20 minutes earlier. She turned toward her desk and froze. The camcorder was gone. Only the empty spot where it had been sat mocking her, a perfect rectangle of dustless surface. The mug beside it was cracked differently now. The hairline split jagged and new, as though the ceramic had flinched. When she looked back toward the cart, the box lid was half open, like a mouth mid-sentence. The fluorescent light flickered just once, and for that fraction of darkness, she swore she saw movement inside the box. A hand, or something shaped like one, folding inward, retreating. The camcorder reappeared on her desk before she even realized she'd turned away. She blinked hard, her pulse roaring in her ears. There it was, black, steady, silent, facing her, the lens cover still shut. Yet she felt it watching, the air thickening in a way no camera should cause. Mara tried to rationalize sleep deprivation, air pressure, electromagnetic interference, but reason sounded like a stranger now, someone knocking on the door of a house that was already on fire. The moment she took a step closer, the camcorder clicked. No buttons pressed, no battery light, just a mechanical click, soft and deliberate, like the turn of an eye. The screen lit up. Playback mode. No human touch required. The same video file blinked into existence. Its name static and smug. Exhibit 23, MP4, except now, the timestamp had changed. It no longer read October 30th, 9:14 p.m. It read October 28th, 9:14 p.m., the current moment. On screen, the image of her desk filled the frame again. But this time, it wasn't the tidy office from the earlier footage. Papers littered the floor. The corkboard hung askew. The lights in the video flickered out one by one, leaving only the camcorder's faint LED glow. And in that glow, she could see herself, Mara, slumped forward on the desk, unmoving. She wanted to run. Her body refused. The edges of her vision shimmered like hot air above asphalt. Her breath came shallow, her limbs slow, every muscle listening to the impossible sound of time folding in on itself. The figure on the screen twitched. The corpse, her corpse, lifted its head just enough for the dim light to catch the hollow beneath its eyes. The lips parted, dry and colorless, and though no sound should have existed on the muted playback, Mara heard the whisper like it was behind her ear. "Finish cataloging." Something clattered behind her. She spun. The evidence carts had all shifted, subtle but undeniable. The aisle that led to the exit was gone, replaced by a maze of metal frames that weren't arranged like that before. Her stomach tightened. The stacks had changed their architecture. She tried the door. Locked. The keycard light stayed red. She banged once, twice, then stopped because she could hear something inside the door. A faint mechanical murmur, like gears turning against each other, slow and steady. The sound of a system rewriting itself. And from the camcorder, still sitting on the desk, a voice began to play. It wasn't hers this time. It wasn't the detective. It was a soft male voice, calm and clinical, dictating a note. Subject 23 exhibits full recognition of loop sequence, progressing to observation phase. Containment achieved. The words wrapped around her like ice water, draining the heat from her lungs. She staggered back until her knees hit the file drawers. The world around her shimmered like a bad signal, edges bending, shadows lagging half a second behind. Somewhere deep in the building, the air vents hummed in a low, rhythmic pulse, almost like breathing. And that was when she saw it, the reflection in the camcorder's lens. Not her face, but the back of her own head, as though the camera were filming from behind her now. The loop was closing. The recording continued. Her future self stood in that reflection, calm and still, watching her move exactly as she did now. The same breath, the same trembling hand, the same horror blooming on the same face. Only one difference remained. The version in the reflection smiled. They found her 2 days later, exactly at 9:40 am, just as the video had shown. At least, that's how the official report read. The overnight janitor, a man named Ruiz, was the first to raise the alarm. He said the lights in the archive had been flickering for hours, making an awful humming noise, like power lines in a thunderstorm. When he finally opened the stacks, the motion sensors tripped, and the cameras on the security feed caught something strange. A single fluorescent bulb swinging back and forth on its cord, as though the air had been disturbed by a gust that came from nowhere. The police sealed off the records room by morning. The first responders thought it was a suicide at first, or maybe an accident, until they saw the camcorder. It was sitting perfectly centered on the archivist's desk, its lens facing the doorway. The screen was on. The battery should have died days ago, but it still showed that familiar frozen image, a room identical to the one they stood in. Except in the video, the detectives themselves were already inside it. The scene was playing out in front of them before they had even moved. Every motion they made echoed half a second later on screen, like an uncanny rehearsal happening in reverse. Lieutenant Harker, the lead investigator, ordered the text to shut the camera off. It wouldn't respond. He yanked the battery, but the feed stayed lit for a moment longer, flickering with static before fading into a dull blue glow. He swore it hummed when he touched it. Some low, electric resonance that made his fingertips ache. They documented everything. Body temperature, scene placement, fingerprints, dust samples. The logbook on the archivist's desk was open to a single unfinished entry. Exhibit 23, unlabeled, recovered from unrecorded transfer. Underneath, a sentence scrawled in smaller handwriting. Playback replicates physical changes in environment. That line sent shivers down the spine of every tech in the room. The deeper they dug, the stranger it got. The call record showed a voicemail from the same internal extension, the archivist's own phone. The timestamp. October 30th at 9:14 p.m., precisely the same minute the footage had first been logged. No voice file remained. The system registered it as unplayable, corrupt data. Evidence Control insisted no such box existed in their inventory. No missing entries, no orphaned serials, nothing that matched Box 23. But when Harker asked to see the physical evidence in the stacks, there it was. A gray box, unlabeled, placed neatly on the cart nearest the door. He opened it with gloves on, the way you open something that might explode, not from fear of chemicals, but of meaning. Inside, there was no camcorder this time, just a folder. And inside the folder, photographs, hundreds of them, printed on glossy police-grade paper. All of the same office, same angles, same lighting. Each photo captured the exact moment of evidence collection, but from impossible perspectives. Some were taken from corners of the ceiling where no cameras existed. Others from the shadows behind the investigators themselves. Then, near the bottom of the stack, a picture of Mara. Not the way they found her before. Standing, alert, a faint expression of realization on her face, as if she'd just seen something no one else could see. The timestamp on that photograph read October 30th, 9:14 p.m. It's 2. No one could explain who took the photos. No latent prints, no source metadata. Harker called in the tech division to analyze the camcorder's SD card, but when they pulled it out, It was blank, not just erased, factory new. No data clusters, no wear pattern. The storage chip itself hadn't even been written to once. It was the cleanest piece of evidence he'd ever seen. Too clean. That night, after the scene was cleared, Harker stayed late, combing through old case logs. He wasn't superstitious, but he believed in patterns. The number 23 appeared in dozens of archived entries. Case file 23A, evidence shelf 23B, locker 23 in the cold storage unit, all somehow connected to technical malfunctions or unexplained corruption errors. He checked the original floor blueprints of the records building, tracing through old maintenance logs. That's when he saw it. The stacks had once been a communications hub decades ago. Room 23. The records showed an incident, unspecified electrical fire in 1989. A small note beside it read simply, "Media room sealed, reassigned to archives, system preserved for testing." Testing what? No one could say. By midnight, the camcorder was logged into evidence storage downtown. A uniformed clerk placed it in locker 23 without noticing the coincidence. The next morning, when the day shift arrived, the locker was open. The camcorder was gone. The security cameras in the evidence room showed nothing except a brief 2-second glitch. A blue flash, a static shimmer, and then the empty locker door swinging. When they played back the feed frame by frame, someone pointed out that the reflection in the metal surface of the locker looked wrong. Like there was a figure standing there, watching the room, someone wearing a gray archivist's coat. And in the last frame before the screen went black, the reflection's mouth curved into the faintest smile. Lieutenant Harker didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in records, paper, data, the human tendency to leave fingerprints where they least intend to. But even he had to admit that evidence box 23 wasn't behaving like anything human. The deeper they looked, the more the pattern expanded, pulling threads from places no one had connected before. 2 days after the stacks were sealed, Harker met with the Digital Forensics Division. A nervous tech named June brought him a printed packet thicker than the Bible. She said the camcorder's model number was discontinued 15 years ago and wasn't even supposed to record in MP4 format. Its firmware didn't match any manufacturer. "It's like someone built this thing using blueprints that were never released," she said quietly, pushing the papers across the table. Inside the report, there were references to other incidents, different cities, different decades, but with identical phrasing in the metadata, Exhibit 23. The earliest dated back to 1978, a VHS recovered from a warehouse fire in Detroit, marked EVID 3, playback restricted. The footage had shown an investigator walking through a building that caught fire 12 hours later, following the same route the real team would take. Another appeared in 1999 in Chicago, labeled Box 23, unauthorized material. The tape displayed a morgue room before an explosion caused by a gas leak. Again, it had been filmed days before the event. No one ever found the person who recorded it. The camera melted in the fire, but its SD card, intact, unburned, contained a still image of the lead investigator staring directly into the lens. In 2013, a cold case unit in Maryland filed a suppressed report about a recovered flash drive labeled simply E23. The data on it consisted of 27 video fragments, each showing the deaths of officers who later died in the exact same sequence within days. The department shut down. The footage disappeared. Now, in Harrow City, it had returned, disguised as a gray evidence box with no label, in a basement where time already felt wrong. Harker didn't want to say the word curse, but he couldn't explain why. When he reviewed the stack security footage, the timestamps drifted by a few seconds every time the camcorder appeared in frame, as if the footage itself bent time around it. The press called it the predictive tape. Conspiracy forums went wild. Some said it was a government project, a surveillance AI prototype that could simulate future crimes based on environmental data. Others claimed it was a viral experiment leaked from a defunct tech startup. But one file stood out to Harker. It was an unclassified memo from 1989, the year the Stacks room had its electrical fire. It mentioned a research division, Project Oubliette, tasked with developing temporal feedback media for behavioral mapping. The memo ended abruptly with a single phrase: containment required. Subject loop detected. That phrase mirrored the last line in the transcript from Mara's camcorder. Subject 23 exhibits full recognition of loop sequence. Containment achieved. He read it over and over until the words lost meaning, just sounds banging against his skull. June called him back to the lab later that night. She looked pale, eyes wide behind smudged glasses. "Sir," she said, "you should see this." On her screen was the recovered playback log from the archive camcorder, not the footage itself, those files were still blank, but a small, hidden metadata cache, something the earlier scan had missed. It listed 22 prior recordings, all purged. The dates stretched back decades, too far for one device to hold. But there was an active entry labeled Playback Pending, 24. Harker frowned. What's feat 24 supposed to be? June scrolled. The system clock blinked 9:14 p.m., the same cursed time again, and the line below updated in real time. The new entry generated on its own, letters appearing one by one on the monitor. Playback scheduled, November 1st, 9:14 p.m. Location, evidence storage, locker 23. They looked at each other. "That's tomorrow," she whispered. The next day, the precinct felt heavier, as if the air carried too much static. Nobody volunteered to check the evidence lockers. When the clock struck 9, the power flickered throughout the building. Every monitor in the forensics lab flashed blue, displaying the same frozen frame, a still shot of locker 23. The camcorder was there again, sitting on the shelf, its red light blinking, recording. Except this time, the reflection in its lens wasn't Mara's. It was Harker's. The live feed showed him standing exactly where he was, except the background behind his reflection was burning. Shelves melting, files curling to ash, and when he raised a hand toward the camera, the reflection raised one back, but out of sync, slower, deliberate. Then the screen went black. Moments later, the fire alarm began to scream. They found locker 23 smoldering, steel warped from within. The sprinkler system failed. No source of ignition identified. But when the smoke cleared, the gray box was there again, sitting perfectly dry on the floor. Inside it, the camcorder, untouched, and under it, a new evidence tag, handwritten in neat black letters. Exhibit 24. Playback replicates physical changes in environment. That night, the detectives sealed the case under emergency classification. The building closed indefinitely for renovation. But in the days that followed, other departments began reporting anonymous deliveries, plain cardboard boxes with no return address, each marked with a single number. One arrived in Ohio, one in Toronto, one in Mexico City, and on each delivery slip, typed neatly in courier font, was a note that read, "To the archivist in charge. Do not open until 9:14 p.m." They kept the case quiet. Publicly, it was a small electrical accident at a records facility. Privately, the department was fracturing. Investigators stopped sleeping. One detective transferred within a week. Another took early retirement without warning. It wasn't the fire. They'd seen worse. It was what the footage did to them after they watched it. Harker didn't tell anyone that every time he closed his eyes, he could see that blinking red light. It would appear in his peripheral vision, in mirrors, in the glass of the vending machine, in the reflection of his car window at night. He told himself it was guilt or trauma. But the red glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if sinking to something inside him. They'd called in a specialist, a behavioral analyst from Quantico named Dr. Celeste Moreno. She arrived with quiet confidence, the kind of woman who had looked into the worst parts of human nature and learned not to blink. She asked Harker a single question before she reviewed any evidence. "Has anyone watched the full recording from start to finish?" No one had. The techs always pulled the plug before the end. So, she volunteered. The room chosen for the viewing was sealed, monitored, soundproofed. 3 observers behind glass, medical supervision ready. Harker sat behind the one-way window with his notebook, jaw tight. Celeste sat alone in the sterile room, the camcorder placed on the table before her. At 9:14 p.m., the device powered on by itself. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her glasses, stared straight into the screen as the feed came alive. The camera's point of view was familiar now. The evidence room, the desk, the hum of fluorescence. But this time, the image didn't jump ahead 2 days. It followed her directly. Celeste saw herself on screen in real time, sitting at that same table, same clothes, same posture. Then, the version on screen tilted its head slightly, studying her. Celeste frowned. She hadn't moved. The reflection had the observers scribbled notes, the sound of pens shaking slightly against clipboards. One of the techs whispered, "Is there a delay in the feed?" Another said, "There's no input source. It's playing itself." The Celeste in the video smiled faintly. Then, without warning, the feed zoomed out, showing the observation booth from their side of the glass. The investigators watching from behind the one-way mirror were now inside the recording. Harker cursed under his breath. He looked down at his notebook and froze. Across the blank page, words had appeared in his own handwriting, though he hadn't written them. "She understands the loop." Celeste stood slowly, facing the camera. "You're not showing me the future," she murmured. "You're recording it as it happens. You're making it happen." The lights in the room flickered. For a second, the 2 Tselas Ts, real and recorded, merged in the reflection, A single overlapping outline. The audio crackled. "Observation complete," said her voice from the speakers. "Subject 24, synchronized." Every device in the room shut down at once. When they forced the door open, Celeste was sitting motionless, eyes open, expression calm. Her pulse was strong, her breathing even. But when she looked up at Harker, her pupils were blown wide. "I saw them," she whispered. "All of them. The archivists before me. The ones who opened their boxes. We're not watching a loop. We are the loop." She was hospitalized for evaluation that night. 2 days later, Harker received an unmarked envelope on his desk. Inside, a photograph of Celeste sitting in her hospital bed, holding the same camcorder. The timestamp on the corner, 9:14 p.m. Security swore no one had entered her room. The hospital cameras glitched that entire minute. After that, the FBI shut down communication. The case was absorbed by an unnamed division. Evidence Box 23 was classified. No one in Harrow ever spoke of it again, but the silence spread like mold. Weeks later, small-town stations began reporting missing inventory, boxes unaccounted for, empty evidence lockers, corrupted archives. Each case involved one employee vanishing, usually the one responsible for cataloging storage. A whistleblower from inside the Bureau eventually leaked a partial file titled "The Loop Theory." It outlined a chilling idea that certain recording devices weren't just documenting events, they were creating synchronization fields, forcing reality to conform to their own playback. The report hypothesized that every Box 23 across different cities was part of a feedback experiment that never shut down. Each one sought an observer to complete the pattern, to keep the loop alive. When there's no observer left, the loop looks for another, and the easiest way to find one is to deliver itself. Harker disappeared 6 months later. The last footage of him showed him driving alone, a cardboard box strapped into the passenger's seat. Traffic cameras caught him pulling over at exactly 9:14 p.m., stepping out of his car and walking into the woods. The vehicle was found the next morning. The box was gone. Only his dashcam remained. It contained a single video file labeled Exhibit 25. The dashcam footage leaked online 3 months later. It started on the news, then spread through forums, subreddits, YouTube re-uploads, with titles like "The Last Tape of Detective Harker, Exhibit 25, Full Footage." Most viewers thought it was fake, too cinematic, too deliberate, until people began noticing details that shouldn't have existed. The reflection of the rearview mirror, for example, showed not Harker, but another man in the driver's seat, one who blinked half a second out of sync with him. Others claimed the trees in the background moved wrong, leaves blowing inward toward the car instead of away. The recording was time-stamped 9:14 p.m., of course. The first 2 minutes showed Harker driving silently down an empty service road, headlights slicing through mist. Then the dashboard clock began to tick faster, jumping seconds ahead every few frames. When it reached 9:14, the car slowed on its own. The camera shook slightly, as if the air had thickened. Then Harker spoke. His voice was calm, resigned. "It's not a box, it's a mirror. Every investigation ends where it started, watching itself." He got out, leaving the driver door open. The camera kept rolling as he walked into the dark, flashlight bobbing. There was a faint hum under the sound of the wind. Mechanical, but almost alive. At the 6-minute mark, a shape appeared at the edge of the light, a gray cube half buried in leaves. Harker approached, kneeling. The audio distorted. His lips moved, but his words came out delayed, like echoes from a second feed. Box 23. No, not 23 anymore. He peeled back a plastic seal, and for the briefest second, the lens caught a glimpse inside. A camcorder, the same model as before. But this time, it was already recording. The feed glitched, showing static bursts that didn't look random. They looked like frames from other times, other rooms. Mara's office, the forensics lab, Celeste in her hospital bed. Then Harker's own face filled the frame, staring straight into the lens. His eyes flicked toward the camera on his dashboard, as if aware he was being watched through multiple layers of recording. "If you're seeing this," he said, "it found you too." The file cut to black, but people who watched the leaked video reported strange side effects. Phones freezing at 9:14 p.m. Exactly. Screens flashing blue before rebooting. Some said they saw faint reflections of their own rooms in the footage, objects rearranged slightly differently than in real life. One user wrote in a comment, "I paused the video and looked at my desk. The box from the thumbnail was sitting there. I don't even own a box like that." Another claimed they found a voicemail from their own number recorded at 9:14 p.m. It contained only one sentence: "Finish cataloging." That comment was deleted an hour later. By the end of the week, the original upload vanished from every platform. All re-uploads were flagged and removed for corrupted metadata. The FBI denied any connection, but tech experts who examined cached fragments confirmed something unsettling. The file format wasn't standard MP4. Its structure contained recursive code, as if the video itself was recording you back while you watched it. And the file name, Exhibit 26. MP4. No one knows who uploaded it. The IP traced to an unregistered municipal server in Harrow City, the same building where Mara once worked, now condemned and sealed. People still go there, though. Urban explorers, ghost hunters, thrill seekers. They post clips of themselves outside the boarded entrance, holding cheap camcorders and whispering jokes about cursed evidence boxes. But sometimes you'll catch something odd in their footage, just a frame or two of a woman's reflection in the background, standing behind them in the dark hallways. Pale face, gray coat. The archivist. They say if you pause the video at exactly 9:14, her eyes move. They say if you keep watching long enough, the box finds you next, and when it does, it labels you Exhibit 27. The file wasn't a file so much as a weather system. Pages thudded onto the table, each stamped with a different clearance level, a chorus of signatures stacked like teeth. Harker read it the way a diver reads depth, aware of pressure building with every paragraph. This was the quiet language of institutions, polite and terrified, pretending control by stacking nouns on top of verbs. The title page didn't help. Interim Summary, Event 23, Harrow PD Archives. Interim meant someone expected a later you to finish what the present you couldn't face. The summary led with the safest thing: chronology. They had time down to the minute, sometimes to the frame. 8:42 p.m. Power fluctuation in the stacks. 8:59. Janitorial log badge in. 9:14. The moment everything insisted on. 9:28. Emergency seal applied. The sentences were dry enough to crack. Still, a quiet pattern coiled underneath. Every door sensor, every temperature probe, every motion detector showed a 3-second drift while the camcorder was active, as if the building inhaled and exhaled on a different clock. The first exhibit was a transcript. Interview with the janitor Ruiz. He spoke in the careful way of people who don't want to sound crazy, but still want to be heard. It was humming. Not loud, just steady, like when a fridge is about to die. The light was moving, but there wasn't any air. I thought someone was in there, or like the room was remembering someone being in there. He paused, then added, softer, "When I looked through the glass, I saw her sitting up at the desk. Except when we opened the door, she wasn't." Behind that, the forensic notes marched in. Glove prints, microfibers, skin cell counts that landed at 0 when they shouldn't. The camcorder casing carried a faint residue of ozone, the kind electricians smell after a breaker kicks. The SD slot was clean enough to shame a manufacturer. They swabbed it anyway. The lab returned a single partial profile, degraded and inconclusive. The line item read, "Trace consistent with subject's own DNA." Subject being the archivist, a polite way of saying the camera might have handled the woman instead of the other way around. June's technical report lived in the middle like a locked room. She wrote that the device firmware showed orphaned functions, subroutines pointing to modules that didn't exist. Think of an office map listing doors to rooms no blueprint admits, she explained. When they tried to emulate the code in a sandbox, time stamps multiplied. A Hall of Mirrors effect. For every minute of playback, the virtual clock spawned a dozen shadow minutes that never committed to disk. The line that made Harker's mouth go dry came near the end. Playback seems to instantiate states in the environment. Not a prediction, but a preference. The file structure suggests it is optimizing toward a known outcome, then writing the world to match. The psychology appendix opened like a bruise, short-form evaluations, sleep logs, cortisol levels. Mara's personnel file was brief, immaculate, ordinary. No complaints, no disciplinary notes. Glowing reviews about attention to detail and unusual retention for spatial layouts. A single note from 5 years earlier slipped in like a splinter. A counselor's line about persistent rumination patterns. Strong need for environmental control following bereavement. It wasn't sensational. It was human. People don't turn into myths before they vanish. They turn into habits. Celeste's debrief read like a sermon whispered through a keyhole. She did not dramatize. She diagrammed belief. She described the camcorder as a lens that exerts a field, which sounded ridiculous until you remembered magnets were ridiculous the first time, too. "You're calling it a loop because it comforts you," she said, according to the transcript. "But loops close. This doesn't. It recruits. In her handwritten margin, the analyst added a smaller, troubling line. Subjects with high archival cognition show faster synchronization. Curators, catalogers, editors, people who think the world can be ordered. The internal affairs section was less poetic. It listed policy breaches like rosary beads. Unlabeled evidence received. Chain of custody compromised. Viewing without supervisor authorization. It was the kind of blame that keeps an agency upright by leaning hard on the living. The subtle cruelty was in the dates. One corrective memo to records bore a creation time 2 days before the incident, responding to a request nobody remembered sending. Another directive about box numbering conventions appeared in the database 6 months earlier, authored by a retired captain who'd never once touched an archive. Midway through the report sat a photocopy of a memo from 1989, choked with blackout bars. The 3 words, "not redacted," were enough to make the room colder. Project Oubliette active. Oubliette, the kind of word that tells the truth if you let it. A place to forget someone on purpose. The addendum noted a media room repurposed for archival testing, and a line so vaguely phrased it sounded like an apology. Observer degradation observed within acceptable parameters. There were photographs, too, polite, glossy, bloodless, the way official pictures always are when they don't want to admit sorrow. In one, a yellow evidence tent stood beside Mara's chair, its tiny plastic face looking weirdly earnest. In another, the corkboard wore a new arrangement of pins that matched no saved configuration in her workstation history. The caption under a third shot, taken wide from the doorway, read, "Scene captured prior to entry." Prior to whose entry? The page didn't clarify. At the back of the binder, the tone changed. A quiet ops memo from a federal address proposed distributed containment. The plan wasn't to destroy the device. It was to dilute it. Seed the system with decoys and false reports. Smother the signal in a crowd of fakes so the authentic pattern couldn't synchronize as quickly. An elegant way of saying, flood the world with noise and hope, the signal starves. Then came the page Harker kept flipping back to, a single printed email that felt like a confession. No header, no footer, just plain text, courier font, 10 words. To the archivist in charge, do not open until 9:14. He could feel the trap in that sentence, the way a fisherman feels the line go tight. It named someone who existed by nature, not by title. Every city had one, every department, every family even. That one person who kept the receipts and knew where the winter coats lived. The loop didn't chase heroes, it chased caretakers. Last, a stapled slip, for director only. He wasn't the director, but paperwork has its own magnetic field, and corners curl toward people who already suspect. The line read, "Viewer advisory." Passive consumption may be sufficient for synchronization in subjects with prior exposure to Event 23 materials. The copy editor in his head winced. The person in his chest understood. Watching was doing. When he closed the binder, the room felt wrong by 2 degrees. The clock on the wall clicked forward, then back, as though choosing. Somewhere in the building a phone rang once and stopped. The fluorescent hum shifted half a note lower. He thought of Ruiz's face, of Celeste's pupil blown wide, of the oubliette memo refusing to explain itself. Somewhere, in a locker or a trunk or a quiet office with a mug shaped like a file folder, a gray box waited for someone who thought they could label it into submission, and under the weight of all that paper, one more page lay trapped, a misfeed from the copier stuck to the binder's backboard. Harker peeled it free. It was a printout of a web upload form, a draft title entered at the top. Evidence Box 23, full explained, 9:14 p.m. Mystery. The cursor in the image blinked beside the field marked Publish. The leak began quietly, as they often do. No thunder, no whistleblower, just a single upload at 9:14 p.m. on a Sunday night. The account name was Last Seen Footage. The video title, Evidence Box 23, full footage found, do not watch alone. The thumbnail was unremarkable, a gray box under fluorescent light, edges blurred, timestamp burning faintly in the corner. Within hours, the video had 40,000 views. By morning, it was trending. Harker read about it from his motel room 2 states away. He hadn't slept in days. The motel clock glowed 9:13, and he caught himself staring at the seconds like a man waiting for a verdict. When the digits changed, the air conditioner hiccuped. He switched his phone off, but the notification tone still sounded once, as if coming from inside the room. The comments were what you'd expect at first. Laughing emojis, fake horror reviews, reaction channels milking the trend. But buried among them were fragments of panic, viewers saying their monitors glitched, showing reflections that didn't match. Others described hearing whispering beneath the static when they hit pause, voices repeating coordinates, file numbers, names. One wrote, "It knows where I work. I'm in archives too." Within 3 days, the account vanished. YouTube removed the video for corrupt metadata and potential malware risk. But screenshots spread faster than deletions could keep up. Mirrors popped up on smaller sites, dark web forums, even TikTok edits that looped the same 5 seconds of flickering blue light with ominous music. Then the disappearances began. A librarian in Chicago failed to return home after closing. A municipal records clerk in Toronto. A warehouse archivist in Ohio. All of them had commented on or shared the Box 23 video. Their offices reported minor anomalies. Clocks frozen at 9:14, printers ejecting blank pages marked with the number 23 in the header, lights flickering in rhythmic pulses. By the end of the month, a pattern was undeniable. The FBI's cyber division quietly flagged the phrase, "Do not watch alone," as a code for restricted content. The video file itself was placed under digital quarantine, a form of containment that meant every time someone tried to upload it, the system embedded their own device ID into the file name, turning the next copy into their version of Exhibit 23. The footage became self-replicating, each viewer creating a personalized record, an expanding tree of observation. Celeste, still under psychiatric supervision, requested to see the footage again. She claimed she could stop it. "It's not a virus," she told her doctor. "It's a recruitment drive." They denied her request. But 2 days later, she vanished from her locked ward. The security footage of her room showed her lying in bed until precisely 9:14 p.m. Boom! The lights flickered. The video feed glitched blue. And then the bed was empty. The next morning, her psychiatrist received an email with no sender address. Attached, a short video titled Exhibit 25 Revised, MP4. The footage showed Celeste sitting in an archive room that didn't exist in any known building. The walls were covered in television screens, each showing the faces of viewers watching the leaked Box 23 video from their own homes. She was speaking to the camera, calm and deliberate. The loop is complete when you look back at it. The only safe angle is indifference, but curiosity is the oldest human impulse. You were always going to open the box. She smiled faintly, the same soft smile Mara had worn before everything fractured. And now you have. After that, governments began treating Evidence Box 23 as a memetic hazard, not a crime. Servers hosting it were scrubbed. Yet the footage continued to reappear, reshuffled, renamed. A gaming streamer uploaded it as background footage and lost their entire channel after their followers reported hearing someone else speaking in his voice during the stream. A true crime podcast played a 5-second clip for analysis. Their soundboard malfunctioned, replaying that same 5 seconds every night at 9:14 p.m. long after the file was deleted. Nobody could explain it in technical terms. The best guess was that the video carried a self-referential data structure, like a Mobius strip of code, one that recorded not just itself, but the act of being watched. Every playback became a new recording, adding to an invisible archive. A theory spread among late-night forums that the real Box 23 was never physical. It was digital, and every person who watched the footage unknowingly created another evidence record, another layer of the loop. Some even claimed that the last seen footage account wasn't an uploader at all. It was the camcorder's login, the system using the internet as its next archive. Harker returned to Harrow once more, against orders, because denial is just another form of superstition. The building was sealed now, windows boarded, a condemned sign flapping like a flag of surrender. But through the crack between planks, he saw faint blue light flicker deep inside. He stood there for a long time, hand hovering over the boards, remembering every warning he had ignored. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number, voicemail notification, timestamp 9:14. He didn't play it, but the transcript appeared automatically, just one line. New file created, Exhibit 26, MP4, location, viewer device. Harker looked up at the boarded window again, the faint pulse of light syncing perfectly with the beat of his heart. Somewhere beyond the wood and glass, the archive was still breathing, and somewhere inside the circuitry of every screen that ever played the footage, the loop waited, quiet, patient, cataloging every eye that ever dared to look. By November, the last official task force on Evidence Box 23 had dissolved. Too many unexplained resignations, too many missing reports. The files that remained were sealed in a federal vault whose location, ironically, had no record. The public assumed the story was over, but archivists know nothing ever really ends. It simply filed deeper. At 9:14 one ordinary evening, the servers at Harrow's decommissioned police department flickered online for the first time in months. No one admitted reactivating them. The security log said, "External signal received." The cameras in the stacks turned on, panning slowly across the dust-covered aisles. The empty desk, the gray box sitting patiently in the dark. A figure walked into frame. It was Mara. She looked different, Hair shorter, face calmer, the kind of stillness that belongs to someone who has stopped arguing with time. She moved like she knew the room better than gravity itself. The camcorder floated to life on the desk without her touching it. "You never stopped looking, did you?" her voice asked softly. "That's what makes you perfect." She faced the camera directly. The same camera that had once watched her death. "They tried to contain it," she continued. "They didn't understand. You can't trap something that feeds on attention. It doesn't want to be hidden. It wants to be seen." Her eyes glimmered in the dim light, the way polished metal does before a storm. Every archivist thinks they're preserving truth, but the truth was never ours to preserve. We just built rooms for it to live in. She stepped aside. Behind her, the shelves weren't shelves anymore. They were screens. Each box along the walls displayed moving images, rooms, faces, reflections, viewers, people at home watching Evidence Box 23. The loop wasn't closed. It had expanded. "The loop isn't punishment," Mara said. "It's recruitment." The camera turned on its axis slowly, autonomously, sweeping across the wall of screens until one image filled the frame. A viewer, sitting in front of their computer, watching Last Scene, watching this story. The viewer flinched. The camera tilted closer. The reflection on the viewer's screen showed Mara standing behind them. "Now it's your turn," she whispered. "Every story needs an archivist." The feed cut to static, but the audio kept recording. The faint rustle of paper, a drawer sliding open, a label printer whirring. Then, a voice. Mara's, distant but clear. "File created. Exhibit 27. Viewer confirmed." The timestamp, 9:14 p.m. In the weeks that followed, a new channel appeared on YouTube under the handle Archives. Its description was empty, except for one line. "Dedicated to preserving lost evidence. Uploads every night at 9:14. The first video? A simple still image of a gray box. The audio, barely audible, was a whisper looped backwards. When reversed, it said, "The archive remembers who looked." And under the description, a single pin comment from the channel itself. "Subscribe. Observe. Don't look away." Maybe it started as a story. Maybe it was a warning. But every story about being seen eventually becomes real. You watched the box. You wondered if it was true. And that's how all archives grow, one curious mind at a time. What if every time you replay a horror story, you feed something that doesn't sleep? What if the act of remembering is the act of summoning? You could close the tab, forget the details. Pretend the number 23 means nothing. But tonight, when the clock hits 9:14, listen carefully. The hum you'll hear in the quiet isn't your fridge. It's the sound of the archive breathing, waiting for you to look back. I'm your narrator, and this has been another case for Last Scene. If you're brave enough to keep watching, subscribe, and stay curious, because some evidence boxes should never be opened, but you already did.